So let's do this, madam, because I want to give you a small history lesson. Now, it's not that Africans are the ones that even give any of these labels. Would you know that it's black people in America, or as you like to say, African Americans, that even love doing these labels? And we wonder why. Because whether you like it or not, we are all black. If we all go outside of this country right now, whether you are black in America, black in Africa or something, we are black people. Now, it's when you're in America that you start seeing the division, because I told you, it wasn't even white people giving me the division. It was my fellow black people. Oh, you African. Oh, you this. So technically, even with what you're saying, I should be African American. You should be black, because I'm actually African, but I was born and raised in America while you are black.
The woman you responded to never said she wasn't black racially. She said she wanted to be identified with her ethnic group, which is African American. Now let me give you a history lesson. The term African American correlates to someone who's mixed with multiple African ethnic groups. That's why we don't specify like you do with the term Nigerian. This term is also only meant for people who are descendants of someone who went through chattel slavery. You have no ancestors who occupied this land as slaves, who were hung on these trees and tortured on this land. Your ancestors didn't have towns destroyed on this land, or fight for civil liberties on this land.
Now, I don't know everything, but this is my perspective from living on both sides, right? So I can understand why a lot of Africans can't relate with black Americans, because our history is different. My mom's generation are Africans that migrated to America for a better life, whereby, like I said, I grew up with black Americans. So in my head, I'm black American. I understand it. I'm being taught slavery and all that. I'm thinking everything like a black American. But my parents, my family made sure I knew my history. That's why I went back to Nigeria and I started seeing that, hey, wait, it's not about slavery. My grandparents are kings and queens here, literally.
You benefit from the 14th Amendment, which was put in place for African Americans. You have no ancestors who were slaves. You are not a descendant of slaves. You being Nigerian would give you a higher probability of being a descendant of slave traders. Nigerians always come to America and think they can speak on, or for African Americans. You have Nigerian politicians trying to take away Black History Month to celebrate African American achievements, and you have Nigerians speaking about how reparations should also focus on climate change.
A couple days ago, you said if you took over as governor, you'd cancel Black History Month in this state. Can you explain, your reasoning behind that? I think it's, for a lot of people, that was shocking to hear someone say that.
Now, so we're all Americans. We come from very different backgrounds. We have Norwegians, we have Finnish, we have Swedish, Polish, German. We have people from African backgrounds in this country. We're all immigrants who came to this country. And so therefore, even including the indigenous American people, the indigenous native people, the people from very different backgrounds, the thing that should unite us is the idea of the American identity. Not because of the small group that we come from, because it's polarizing. If we're going to have a Black History Month, then what about a Finnish History Month? What happens to a Jewish History Month? What happens to a Swedish History Month? The list goes on and on and on. But these are all American history. So therefore, I feel that as governor, the way to move forward to stop this division and this polarization that's going on in our community is to forge a single American identity that we can all identify with first. No one is saying you should get rid of your background, and no one is saying that in the middle of that, there's not going to be any Black history being taught or people of that background history being taught. But also, how about Finnish history? How about Norwegian history? How about German history? How about the rest of the people that make up this great and beautiful state of Michigan also having their history being taught in an American History Month?
And he's recently published a book, Reconsidering Reparations, with Oxford University Press, which is a really exciting, I think, and timely, important volume that raises makes a case for the necessity of linking questions of climate justice and, how we respond to the climate crisis with a historically informed understanding of what the distribution of a material inequality looks like in the world today, tied specifically to the legacies of, slavery, transatlantic slave trade, colonialism, and so on. That these things should be thought together. That these questions of, racial reparations for slavery and climate justice actually are quite intertwined as problems for us to think about today in terms of justice.
For climate justice and the relation of climate justice to this way of thinking about reparations is, what do you think is a good foundation for racial justice? Do you think racial justice is likely to move forward in a world that's 3 to 4 degrees hotter with sea level rise, disruptions to food systems, energy systems, and displacement in the billions? Or do you think that's a world where justice is likely to recede or not advance? I think that's a bad foundation for racial justice. So even if you don't care intrinsically about the idea of climate justice or don't buy the conceptual connections, you should buy it for just being for what you're for from the perspective of racial justice. If you want it to actually if you want any scheme of racial justice, checks, apologies, memorials, reconciliation commissions, if you want any of that stuff to do something and to have the good consequences you want, then you should want the kind of practical environment where they could.
Why didn't he advocate for the victims of the Biafra Civil War to focus some of their payments on climate change too? There are a lot of things Nigerians could focus on. The topics of who should or shouldn't be considered African Americans, taking away Black History Month, and reparations for climate change shouldn't be among them.